Nobody should tell us where we should bring our continent. We don't want to say we want to be Britain. We don't want to say we want to be America. We want to create a continent which the African people will be proud of. If it will be like in UK, it will be America, let it be.
If we can just tap from the 1.2 billion travelers who are traveling every year, and we attract those tourists to come to Africa, 500 million, for instance, you will be able to employ all young Africans with 500 million travelers.
Africa has a splendid beauty that has to be experienced.
The continent consists of 54 independent countries and boasts of a significant number of beautiful islands, including the island of Madagascar, one of the largest and most beautiful islands on Earth. Others are the Seychelles, Mauritius, Bijagos, Socotra, Cape Verde, the Madeira, Sao Tome and Principe, the Comoros, Reunion, St. Helena, Tristan da Cunha, Ascension, Bioko, the Azores, and the Canary Islands. That a vast majority of people are uninformed about Africa and her people is an established fact. While according to most, there are no valid excuses for such ignorance in these days of technological advancement, opinions from previous episodes lay a good portion of the blame squarely on the shoulders of Africans and their leaders.
Successful ministers and ministers for information think that propaganda and talking about what government failed to do is the way to create information for the government. No, it has not occurred to all of them that creating a powerful media that tell your story and encourage people to understand the challenges you feel is far more important than some of the things we do.
They don't work half as much as their counterparts in other parts of the world with regards to positively projecting their countries, attracting investors and tourists, and systematically controlling the narratives of the continent.
We have identified the problem, but it's our time now. What do we need? The resources to set up our own mechanism of countering these things, of highlighting the successes of Africa. And this is where I am saying good things are not portrayed, they are not highlighted by the foreign media that are outside Africa. Why? Deliberately so. It's not that they are unwittingly doing so, but deliberately so, only to highlight the negative part. Some of those fellows, they have actually planned already how Africa should be standing as a trading partner, not equal trading partner, but as a trading partner, in a way, a dumping ground of certain things, or an initiator of innovations and better things, for Africa. What do we lack in Africa? So what we need to do is for ourselves to portray the good image of Africa. Let the whole world know what Africa is all about. But unfortunately, if we leave it to others to do it for us, they will never do it in our favor or to our advantage. And if you are having a business entity, it is for you to market what you produce and to market your business. If anyone else markets your business for you, it will mean you will never prosper. So it's for us, Africa, to market Africa as we are, as what we want to do, so that those that will be interested in investing in Africa to be attracted by our own narrative. And if our narrative is wrong, everybody will perceive Africa to be dark, to be corrupt, to be undeveloped, which on the ground, it's a different story.
There's a land of wide open spaces, so many, many, many faces. There's a land of wide open spaces, so many, many beautiful faces.
This, prepare yourself for the unexpected.
With a specific focus on tourism industry in Africa, experts have it on authority that there is so much more to tourism than the leaders know. Issues that may seem trivial but can potentially impact negatively on their personal lives.
Tourism industry is a very sensitive industry. You need to think of what other sectors are doing that should not negatively affect the tourism industry. For instance, safety, security, and also some other regulations that are being put in place by other sectors that can affect tourism and the tourists not to come to Africa, for instance. If you, for instance, put up laws or regulations that are not favorable to visitors, make them inconvenient for them to be here or to come to travel. If you make, for instance, some other laws that are not favorable to them, then it will be difficult for visitors to come to the country.
From the stables of the publishers Echoes Africa magazine comes your favorite TV show, Echoes from the Valley. African story like you've never seen it.
So many of these folks, they see Africa as just one country.
And the woman came to me and she goes, so what color is the flag? I said, what flag? She said, the flag of Africa. I was like, oh my God. I'm like, do I now educate this woman or do I just tell her and move on?
Recorded in locations across Africa and diaspora, it is Africa from African perspective.
These fellows invaded Africa without visas, without passports. And what about? About resources.
Echoes from the Valley on AIT, Saturdays at 7:30 a.m. It is time to tell the true African story. Present your own truth.
They are working in our psychology as Africans.
That they don't understand that it was sensationalized for, marketing purposes. But that's exactly why I think people have a misconception of Africa and African people.
The conversation about who's the most African, we're really spending a lot of time on something that really is not that significant. What's significant is what we do.
As governments, as individuals, we have got to tell our stories.
What is your African story? What is your origin and the history? What makes your culture and tradition unique? What are your milestones? Echoes from the Valley on Africa Independent Television, AIT. For sponsorship, participation, and advert details, please call the numbers on your screen. Echoes from the Valley, telling the African story.
For people to get to know more about a continent, the individual countries needs to announce themselves, not just by making public statements, but by being good examples to their followers.
We need to follow through in terms of what, all of that, the natural African personality. How do we then transmute that into, an economic earning for the country? And I think the South Africans have done that well with their decentralized or what they call a community-based tourism, saying every South African should be somebody that could make $1 or a rand, from selling South Africa, from creating some kind of value around yourself, being in your natural environment. And I think other countries need to be able to do that. to say we're warm, we're welcoming, we're in a country other people would love to see. You know, how can I become part of this? I may just be an owner of a small house, but my house happens to be in a township, which, you know, for political and other reasons, it is historic. Our townships are historic. I mean, they are written about in the history books. Maybe I can start a, you know, some kind of side museum or something, you know, to show tourists, you know. But so that I think is the one thing that as Africans we need to transmute, you know, what is good about ourselves into commercial gain. Because I don't think we're avaricious enough, and I say that in the nicest possible way.
How important is tourism to the development and growth of the continent?
Just tap from the 1.2 billion travelers who are traveling every year, and we attract those tourists to come to Africa, 500 million for instance. You'll be able to employ all young Africans with 500 million travelers traveling to Africa. If you just take that, for instance, in Namibia, when you have the every 11th tourist coming to Namibia, you create one job. Just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. One job is created. Now, if you take continent and you say you have 500 million travelers coming to Africa, how many jobs are you creating? So you end up having overemployment, and the others will come to be employed. So tourism has got a potential to alleviate poverty and unemployment.
The environment is said to play a huge role in promoting tourism and foreign investments, but somehow the majority of the countries do not appear to reckon with this.
For tourists to come in the country, they need to see a clean environment. They need to see environment that is protected, because in Africa we have still virgin landscape, and we should not damage that. We, from the environmental point of view, is people who are in charge of the environmental protection. We want things to remain intact. But of course, with development, we need to make sure that there is less significant impact on the environment. Any activity should do least impact on the environment. That means that we balance. We have to develop as a continent, but also we have to make sure that we should not have a significant damage to the environment. We should not cause that significant damage to it. And that's what we need to do. We need to make sure that we prevent toxic material being dumped in Africa. And this is what is happening. Every day you find some continents pursuing, trying to convince African leadership to come and dump their material, toxic material here, which in the long run will affect our continent.
From the stables of the publishers Echoes Africa magazine comes your favorite TV show, Echoes from the Valley. African story like you've never seen it.
So many of these folks, they see Africa as just one country.
And the woman came to me and she goes, so what color is the flag? I said, what flag? She said, the flag of Africa. I was like, oh my God. I'm like, do I now educate this woman, or do I just tell her and move on?
Recorded in locations across Africa and diaspora, it is Africa from African perspective.
These fellows invaded Africa without visas, without passports. And what about? About resources.
Echoes from the Valley on AIT, Saturdays at 7:30 a.m. It is time to tell the true African story. Present your own truth.
They are working in our psychology as Africans.
That they don't understand that it was sensationalized for, marketing purposes. But that's exactly why I think people have a misconception of Africa and African people.
That conversation about who's the most African, we're really spending a lot of time on something that really is not that significant. What's significant is what we do.
As governments, as individuals, we have got to tell our stories.
What is your African story? What is your origin and history? What makes your culture and tradition unique? What are your milestones? Echoes from the Valley on Africa Independent Television, AIT. For sponsorship, participation, and advert details, please call the numbers on your screen. Echoes from the Valley, telling the African story.
Is Africa doing enough to project itself to the rest of the world?
All sectors need money. I said, if we can just put more money in tourism, we will have no problem with employment in the country. Because once we promote tourism outside, and we get, for instance, if you get 5 million per annum tourists coming here, how many people employment you have created in the country? And if you say every 11th tourist arrival in Namibia creates one job, times that, divide that 5 million with 11, you talk about how many hundreds of employment, thousands of employment. So now that is not properly understood by people who do not really analyze the effectiveness of tourists coming here.
Every year, people all over the world take vacations and travel to various parts of the globe in order to unwind, spend quality time with their families, and explore new places. The percentage that makes Africa their destination points are significantly lower in compared to others.
You have about 1.2 billion tourists, international tourists, but Africa could only manage to get less than 50 million so far. From that, per annum, you have 1.2 billion tourists traveling per annum, but Africa could only get about 40 million. So last year Africa could only manage to get about 40 million there, and the year before about 36 million. That means that is far than the international tourists traveling. That means, and this one, when you look at this, these statistics, you find more tourists coming to North Africa. That takes close to 50%, and then to Southern Africa about 20%, and then West Africa 7%, and Central Africa. So, we need to do more, and what we need to do is to also collaborate. We need to look at how we can access, even for Africans to travel amongst themselves, promote tourism amongst themselves. We really tap only about less than 10% from the market, about 3% out of 1.2 billion people, travelers. These are the tourists. Africa can only get less than 3% per annum. There are many things. Some perceptions. When these people are there, when they perceive Africa as a continent of disease, a continent of wars. We need to do much to market Africa as a prosperous Africa, as a prosperous continent, a safe continent. And the tourists will not travel to a country where they see that there are risks involved, even if there are good things there. In Africa, we have much to offer. Sceneries we have, the best. Landscape. We have the wildlife attraction in Africa. You only find most of the world life in the world you find in Africa. But yet, we get less. But travelers, they want to come to Africa. But some of them, they have this understanding, this perception that Africa is not a safe continent to travel to. There are a lot of diseases, there are wars, and they see this image. And even if an isolated something, they take that as very serious. And they take Africa as one country. When something happens in North Africa, which is close to Europe, They will not even travel to Southern Africa because I think when you look at that, it is about 1 hour traveling from there to Morocco, you tell from there. But when you travel from here to Morocco, it is mostly 5 hours. But they take it that it's Africa, it's unsafe to travel to Africa. So we need to do much to market the continent.
This is quite sad, considering all that the continent has to offer. The difference in income tourism could make on the economies of African countries is enormous, and with all the talks on the need of diversification of the economy, political leaders in Africa needs to get their acts together.
It's the fastest growing sector in the world today, especially in Africa. In Namibia, is one of the sectors that are doing well. Therefore, we just need to develop it. And Africa needs to work towards that. Currently, tourism contributes about close to 50 billion GDP on the continental level, 50 billion US dollar to the economy, to the continental economy. That means to the GDP of the African continent. Now, when you take that amount of money, if you can tap, and we talk about less than 50 million tourists coming to Africa, and with that, you have that amount. If you can just have, for instance, 200 million or 300 million work towards that, visitors coming to Africa, we will get more money, and this money will be used to fight poverty and also to fight the unemployment in the continent. And you'll be able to retain our young people who are traveling, seeking for opportunities to other continents, and some of them perishing in the Mediterranean Sea.
Africa is attractive, very attractive, but it does not mean that it's free for every suitor or potential suitor. No. Africa is for they that believe in Africa. Africa is waiting for you with its capital, human resources, with its conducive environment to set up business, to do business, with its unpolluted climate. Although, yes, we are working towards and we are working together with the people that want to manage the climate change. But Africa today, it is relatively clean, so therefore they should come to Africa as equal development or developing partners, but not as exploiters. We cannot afford to go back to the colonization era. We can only go forward with those that are serious in assisting Africa to develop itself. And therefore, Africa is waiting for you with open arms, but come as an equal partner and not as a superior to Africa.
As the technocrats of our country, we would like to realize the blueprint that they had in mind for closer cooperation with sister African countries. We'd like to see trade. We, with our A319, in terms of belly capacity of cargo, there are so many things that can, that could be taken between between Nigeria and Ghana and Namibia, in terms of trade, in terms of, export capability, us importing, but also goods that they may require from here. Secondly, I think the important thing is also of cultural tourism. And I think we alluded to this, that being a country which is geopolitically where we are, I think that's fair and good, but geographically we are a small country. So in terms of cultural tourism, we would like to have a situation where our brothers and sisters in West Africa would also surely want to come to a country which God has blessed with the oldest desert in the world. We'd like to share what is special about our country with fellow Africans that we know would have the same sense of awe for it, the same sense of respect for it, because I think those are, characteristics African people have in common. So we'd like to open up to Africa. I think Africa, especially Namibia, we've opened up in most sectors to a lot of Western countries. Not that there's any problem with that, but I'm hoping with this one, it really would be saying to, our sister countries, this is Namibia, it's open to you. Come and see who we are. We hope you enjoy, what we have in the country, beautiful scenery, it's pristine and so forth. However, let's also do business, because in terms of, GDPs of our country, all countries would like to see, positive growth. And I think as African countries, everybody is aware Namibia is a country that is very mineral rich. And those types of discussions in terms of resources and so forth, our sister countries of West Africa, come and have a look.